Night School.
Night School.
I forgot the title.
Okay.
Well, I forgot the subtitle.
Okay.
Magic. I think it's Magic. It's Ritual, Power, and Purpose by Walter Ernest Butler. So magic can mean anything, right? I think it's fun to visit this subject because the first episode we did on the podcast was about Chinese magic and chi powers and stuff. That was John Chang,
the Magus of Java. Right.
And we haven't looked into how the art of magic is practiced in a Western context. And I have read a few of the authors from the Western esoteric tradition who practice what they would call magic. And I have found an author who I think is really clear and really grounded and really helpful and seems super psychologically and theologically sound, and Walter Ernest Butler. And if you wouldn't mind putting up an image at this point, Evan, he bears a striking resemblance to Yoda. He has the same exact sly, blissed out, thin-lipped smile and big ears, and he was very, very short, and he walked with a cane. And a comical resemblance to Yoda. Huh. And I don't know what his voice sounds like because there's nothing recorded of him, but I know I'll might be able to get my hands on some recordings later because a friend of mine was apprenticed under him back in the day, and they sent audio tapes back and forth instead of letters. And so there are audio tapes of him that friends of his had, but I don't know what his voice sounds like. But Maharishi Mahesh Yogi sounds like Yoda. The voice like this, and like sometimes he'll flip the sentences. Yeah. So maybe both of those guys influenced the character of Yoda in some way. Like the people who created that character knew
You've told me about that, right? Like that George Lucas was inspired by a character in particular?
It was, my humanities professor at Maharishi University, Matthew Beaufort, told us that when the original Star Wars scripts were submitted by George Lucas, it was crystals instead of a force, and some feedback was provided to whoever he submitted them to that it should be a force, and they had just recently gone to Maharishi's lectures and were basing it loosely on that. Okay. Although the force is, Maharishi was teaching mostly about pure consciousness. He didn't talk about chi all that much, although he did teach like hatha yoga practices for increasing the flow of chi, or prana as they call it. But it did still bear a resemblance. And so almost certainly if... and Matthew Beaufort also, he said that the Yoda character also came into play after that. So I have that third-hand evidence to believe that it was loosely based on Maharishi, but the resemblance to WE Butler is crazy. Very, very crazy resemblance, especially with his posture and the cane and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. And really, so what we're talking about today, when I say magic, the framework that WE Butler is teaching is like, imagine if you took a really comprehensive view of Christianity that took into account the fact that God is understood at different levels of development, and that to have a complete alignment with God is to live in a God-aligned way practically in your daily life, and also mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and that what Jesus was trying to do was, and actually let me read W.E. Butler's quote on Jesus, one of my favorite quotes on Jesus I've ever heard.
Cool.
And he's explaining that that Jesus was initiating a kind of what he calls a world alchemy. So here's the full quote, a little bit long. In the process of the evolution of the universe energy of various types has been misplaced and has been added to the misdirected thought of the whole of evolving humanity throughout the ages. So the psychic atmosphere of this planet periodically becomes charged and overclouded by the evil vibrations until at certain points in time the evolving life is checked. It is then that great souls come to earth to recall the minds of men to the ways of wisdom and the paths of peace, and to lift a little of the heavy burden of the sin and suffering of the world. The most momentous and significant of these evolutionary cycles came some 2,000 years ago, when the nadir, I don't know what that word means, of the descent of life into form was reached, and the whole of the manifesting life was in danger of being totally checked and thwarted. Then came he, the incarnate manifestation of the Logos, the Lord of Light, and through his identification of himself with the whole human race, he gathered up into himself all the evil conditions of the planet, and by the power that was his, he transmuted them into higher conditions and influences, a world alchemy. So too, by his life and death, he established a line of direct contact between the transcendent God and evolving humanity, along which there might flow into the world's soul the regenerating divine forces, and thus a new and living way was made, whereby mankind might enter into the most holy place.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, so he's describing a vertical kind of alchemy and a horizontal kind of alchemy. So he's saying that since Jesus personally embodied even the mortal and fleshly and animal and human world that we occupy in this conversation, but also embodied the very highest transcendent. Since he did both of those, he created, he accomplished a vertical alchemy between the highest and the lowest,
Okay.
which provided for us a path. So like, I don't know if you remember the morphic resonance idea put forth by...
Morphic resonance.
Yeah, and his name is very close to me right now, but I can't remember what it is. So Evan, if you think of it, maybe you could throw that on the screen later. No, it's Rupert Sheldrake. Thank you. It was just up currently.
No, I just typed in morphic resonance.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant that you just already had it on the screen. Like, no, I was reading Rupert
just
Sheldrake right
researching
now.
morphic resonance.
I'm not going to listen to you guys. I'm reading Rupert Sheldrake. One of the really cool phenomena that he recorded was that, because he was basically saying that human consciousness is a field, and that consciousness in general is fields within fields. And one of the things that he explained was that monkeys were taught how to harvest potatoes, this particular species of monkey, on this island, and at the same time, monkeys on a different island started harvesting potatoes.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember this idea.
Yeah. So he wasn't just teaching that little band of monkeys to harvest potatoes. He was teaching monkey consciousness to harvest potatoes.
Okay.
And so because of that field effect,
Yeah.
when a human being accomplishes something, it in psychic or astral realms, or however this works, it opens the possibility for others to follow in those footsteps and access that same channel.
Okay.
And
yeah.
so the vertical alchemy that Jesus accomplished of connecting the highest and the lowest is what WE Butler is describing. And then the horizontal alchemy is for Jesus to connect with and see himself and relate with and have a resonance with all kinds of human beings. Mm-hmm. I believe that he traveled the world. And I believe that he was trained. There it is, Rupert Sheldrake, the blue one.
Nice.
And I believe that he was trained in the Middle East, and he was a native Hebrew. I don't believe like that some say that he went and learned from the Tibetans and the Indians, and that's how he became enlightened. Like it seems like he was a native of his area, but I also do believe that he traveled, and I don't think that he needed to learn by traveling. I think he traveled to spread the love everywhere and connect with everybody, and initiate the horizontal alchemy.
So like he already got it, and he was traveling around and seeing how like, oh yeah, you guys got it too, but you have a different flavor of getting it. Like that?
Well, my theories are, I really like the Urantia book, and it's a channeled work, so that's a take it or leave it thing. If it's really helpful, use it. If it's not, don't. I really believe in the Urantia book's accuracy because of how ennobling and calming I find it, and how much its descriptions of Jesus and his conduct inspire me to work harder to follow Jesus' example and try to be more like him. And so I think the Urantia book is wonderful, and that's the way that it introduces Jesus. Is at first he took care of his family because his father passed away when he was relatively young, and that was really his priority, was just taking care of his family until the age where his family was straight enough that his siblings could take it from there. And all of the training he got was local to his tradition, and he was an expert in his local scriptures. And then when he traveled, yes, he was training people as he traveled, but not formally. He was training them by interacting with them, and because he had such a grounding understanding of the universal truth, he was able to see it reflected in other people and thereby magnify it and draw it out of them because he could see it so well. So he traveled in order to see the divine in all people. And that was, the Urantia book describes it, saying that was a part of that as the creator of this universe, it was a part of his initiation to full glory of creatorhood, to see the divine in all the peculiarities of this planet. The way that W.E. Butler describes the same thing is that he was alchemizing horizontally by connecting with all those different people. And those are both really saying the same thing in a different way.
Yeah.
And so that's the cross, the horizontal alchemy and the vertical alchemy as it's embodied by one man.
Okay.
And then Jung explained, and I'll read one more quote from the book here, that there's enormous power in symbols. So if you're going to pray, you could pray in language, in words, and the words that you're using are limited ways for you to communicate feelings of devotion that are really beyond description, but you use words to represent them. Well, one of the theories of the kind of magic that WE Butler is describing is that symbols, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, you could say a symbol is worth 1,000,000 words. A symbol is a fundamental image that speaks not just to your conscious awareness in a powerful way, but to your unconscious awareness in a very powerful way, and thereby has an integrative effect on you. Like
Okay.
it helps sync up your conscious mind with your subconscious mind, and thereby grant you access to your latent power and freedom and connection. And let me read this Jung quote before
Okay.
I go on a different rabbit hole.
Sure.
So this is Jung. Who speaks in primordial images speaks as with 1,000 tongues. He grips and overpowers, and at the same time he elevates that which he treats out of the individual and personal transitory into the sphere of the eternal. He exalts the personal lot to the lot of man, and therewith he releases in us too all those helpful forces which have ever enabled humanity to rescue itself from whatever distress and to live through the longest night. So each one of us is a culmination of all the evolution that has occurred up to this point.
Okay.
You know?
Sure. Yeah.
Like there's a sense in which all of the heavenly bodies, all of the various archangels and angels and forces that exist in the very, very light, fine, subtle, beyond astral world that we would call heaven, and the way that they then interacted with one another such that it took certain forms, and then minerals developed and plants developed and animals developed, and our consciousness blossomed out of that whole entire process of creation and evolution has culminated as you right now in this present moment.
Okay. Yeah.
And yet you're almost entirely unaware of that whole process.
Sure.
And you're almost entirely unaware. This is our condition that we're sitting in right now today. We have severe amnesia. And W.E. Butler is basically saying the kind of magic he's teaching is the theory is that the cure to our amnesia, or you could say a cure or a treatment for our amnesia, would be to engage with symbols using the imagination with a spirit of devotion consistently over time in a very balanced way, so that the forces that we're calling back in under our dominion and calling back into our conscious awareness they're done in a balanced way, so that they don't throw us off in a way that creates more psychic instability, and that over time we can reclaim our lost and forgotten inheritance and heritage as children of God.
Okay.
And that's the kind of thing that Jesus was talking about when he said, "Know ye not that ye are gods?" It's like, do you not remember who you are? Do you not remember where you come from?
Right.
Have you just completely abandoned that, and now you think that you're just a material thing, like struggling upwards? So really this magic tradition is firmly grounded in the fall theory of Genesis, that there is a perfect way to exist. There's a way to exist that's actually in the flow of God's natural laws. And it involves human beings being very, very powerful and glorified and beautiful compared to what we are right now. So whereas other systems sometimes will advocate for the transcendence of the world and maybe the foolishness of being material, or the idea that we want to end the cycles of reincarnation and not be gross and material anymore and just be in heaven permanently instead, this absolutely does not imply that. In alignment with the Bible, what this kind of magic is saying is that God intended to create material worlds, or more accurately, create beings that create material worlds, extend his own nature in all of the various layers needed to culminate in these material worlds. But there has been errors committed along the way that have greatly reduced our sharing in the inheritance of the heavens.
Okay.
And that's what Jesus was up to, and that's what magic is up to. So this kind of magic is like a Christian neo-Jungian method of psycho-spiritual development.
Okay. And so are there like specific things that went wrong along the way, or is that just sort of generally we did too much bad stuff? Like, is there specific stuff?
I haven't gotten into W.E. Butler's cosmology. So,
Okay.
his story of how we got here.
Yeah.
And I think that his story would generally align with the Bible. So Butler was a priest of the liberal Catholic Church. And the liberal Catholic Church basically, they recognized that the Catholic Church participates in ceremonial magic, as in...
Yeah.
And almost every church, except for W.E. Butler points out in this book that the Protestants don't and some Buddhist sects don't. They try to avoid any ceremonial magic, but that every religious tradition besides that does engage in using special words and using special shapes and symbols and doing things in a certain order and believing that things can be spiritually charged and then given to devotees so that they have a positive effect on them.
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholics are obviously a big one.
Of course.
So the liberal Catholic Church, instead of ignoring the fact that it is ceremonial magic in a sense, and I would think that the liberal Catholic Church would also feel that there's a lot of repression going on in the Catholic Church. Instead, the liberal Catholic Church says, no, what we are doing is ceremonial magic, and they're just trying to promote Christianity in a way that is less repressive and more conducive to this kind of psycho-spiritual development.
Okay.
So it was influenced by Western esotericists. I don't know if that's the explicit purpose of being liberal Catholic Church instead of Catholic Church, but I do know that Bishop Robert King, who introduced W.E. Butler to this tradition of magic that we're talking about, resigned from his position in the Catholic Church because he wasn't allowed to be a part of a magical fraternity and be involved in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And that a lot of other people resigned for the same reason. So the Catholic Church has distanced itself from Masonry and from other magical or esoteric fraternities. And one of the things this book points out is that post the Enlightenment era, it has been concluded that the peak evolution for humanity is to, with the conscious mind, adhere to rules. So if the conscious mind adheres to ethical rules, this is kind of the religious theory of our day, that's the peak achievement of evolution. It's like I've got the rules and I'm consciously subordinate to them.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that it might repress unconscious forces without actually providing them a better way to extend and express. So this is what Butler calls subliminating, is when so let's take the sex instinct, for example, which is the instinct to create.
Mm-hmm.
So people will, instead of having sex, because they have a sex instinct that they realize derives them biologically to want to have more sex than actually contributes to human flourishing. So there's this imbalance between everything that they want to do sexually and what makes sex actually, its peak thing that contributes to human evolution and stuff.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that divide? One thing Butler describes is that if you play sports and do aggressive activities as a way of releasing that sexual energy, because those are two different instincts, the instinct to create and build and be strong and be physical, and the instinct to create, that actually entangles the psyche. But if you engage in a creative endeavor as an expression of your sexual energy, that's actually an enlightening and positive way to subliminate that energy. And
Why?
so...
Like, why is that? It doesn't get, entangled in some way that's bad? I guess because the art instinct is not, as necessary as the exercise instinct. Is that what you mean?
No, it's not that. It's that Butler is saying that there are energies and instincts of a certain type, and that you have to express that energy in a way that's aligned with its type.
Okay.
And this gets into the subtle science in the magic tradition of association. This subtle thing of association. There's these funny memes that go around that'll say Tuesday has 7 energy. And it's just what is that even?
I've never seen that.
Okay, do you get it though? Tuesday has 7 energy,
no.
and Tuesday is green, and 9 is purple and has Thursday energy.
No.
Okay, it's who is that? Didn't Brendan talk about this? Oh, not that I recall.
Yeah. He talked about
Brennan.
Brennan. Yeah. Brennan talked about a system where there was like 7 different colors of like enlightenment to go through, and like what you view the world as, like when you're at those different color-based stages. I think it's different. I mean, there might be some crossover with it, but
there is some crossover. So, so he's talking about the Ken Wilber model of psychospiritual development that uses the chakra colors and some of the associated themes of the chakras. So let's use that as an example. The when you're angry, there is a burning in your stomach that is a point that's a couple inches above your belly button, and in the chakra system, that's described as the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is colored, I want to make sure I don't screw this up, because it's red, orange, yellow. Yeah, the solar plexus is yellow. And the solar plexus is also sometimes associated with the sun. So those are associated themes. Energy, yellow, the sun, that point where anger burns. Do you see how those are associated concepts, but not in a way that you can articulate objectively?
Yeah, I thought of a few other things too. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
I get you.
That's what the memes are talking about with 9 has Thursday energy, but that's just a comical, very, very abstract version of that same thing. But symbols have associations with one another that are unconscious. So we can clearly see that, those make sense. But that doesn't mean that we can objectively describe why they make sense. So over the generations, Western esotericists have inherited this tradition by which over the generations, what a sentence. My sentence structure's off the hook right now.
So many asides. Wow.
People have engaged in that art of symbol association and then created a balanced system of metasymbols that collect associated symbols, and by meditating on and vividly imagining composite symbols or meta symbols that contain associated symbols, the psyche is able to be better balanced. Now, because of those kinds of associations, Butler understands that certain energies can only be sublimated in certain ways without entangling the psyche. So Butler understands, based on that subtle art of association I'm describing, that sexuality and creativity are of a common type, so that they're compatible with one another, in a way that sexuality and the aggressive and strong instincts are 2 different types. So tangling them up with each other is not good.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. There's like creativity involved in those 2 things, where there's more warlike. The physical exercise thing is more like warlike and work-like. It's kind of different. It's not about creation in that way.
Yeah. So in the system that Brennan was talking about, that Evan mentioned, the bottom root chakra, which is red, would be that kind of energy that you can express playing football. You can go express your red energy playing football. And then the next energy, the orange energy of the sacral chakra, you can express that by singing songs. You can express that by having sex. And it's not going to be nearly as likely to repress your sexual instinct in a psychologically harmful way if you express your orangeness being creative.
Okay.
But Butler doesn't go into the chakra system in this. He does in other works. He has a book about the aura where he talks about chakras. But in this work, he's just talking about the general principles of these systems and why they work. And so in the chakra system, to use this Brennan example that came up, there's always, with good teachers, an emphasis on balancing them and aligning them. Well, it's the same thing in the Western esoteric tradition, and we're not going to go into the details of the map, but the Tree of Life map with its 10 sephirot that record those composite symbols that contain associated symbols are arranged in such a way that they're encouraged to be balanced. So, for example, if you have too much justice and not enough mercy, or too much mercy and not enough justice, then it's like if you were just working out your left leg and your left arm every day, and eventually you'd become unbalanced. And if you started convincing yourself that your body is balanced, even though it's very clear that you're only working out your left arm and your left obliques and your left shoulder and your left arm, that could make you weird over time. That could turn you weird, and it could turn you unbalanced. And people can intuitively tell the difference between a well-balanced person and an out-of-balance person. And some people are just right-leaning or left-leaning or up-leaning or down-leaning. And so this system is about being supersymmetrical.
Uh-huh.
And when we become supersymmetrical in our personality and we balance our personality by reflecting on all these composite symbols in a balanced way, we become whole, we become present, we become healthier. One of the theories that Butler covers in this book is a theory of mesmerism. And it was basically Mesmer was a hypnotist who described very early on, as far as Western thought is concerned, that there's a life force energy that travels all throughout the body, and that disease is caused by that energy not being able to travel, and that energy's impact on the body can come under the dominion of the psychic aspect of the person. So you can, in other words, actually use your imagination, especially if you're operating at unconscious levels of mind, to move life force energy through the body more fluidly so that you enjoy greater physical health. Okay. And you can do that using hypnotism. So I right now, if I brought you through like 10 minutes of talking through relaxing and just gradually got you to relax your body more and more and more, then your consciousness would no longer be stuck at the material level, would be operating at a more unconscious or deep level. And then if we described that there was energy moving through your body up and down and it's enriching all of your organs, and if we described that movement in a way that was conducive to the health of your organs and the way that fluids move through your body, like the glands and the blood flow and stuff, that would have a positive effect on your health, even though we're doing nothing physical. Because consciousness affects matter, not the other way around. And so for example, we talked about in A Course in Miracles, it defines magic as attempts to affect consciousness with matter. So this kind of magic that we're talking about right now is not the bad kind of magic that Christians are concerned about, that A Course in Miracles points out. Christians are going to be concerned with this anyway because it's just something different, and that's fine. But that's what we're talking about. So Butler's definition of magic, which he borrowed from another teacher named Dion Fortune, is the art of affecting changes in consciousness at will.
Okay, so we're talking about stuff that is like qigong and also like what's that other type of energy healing? Like there's a place very nearby here. What's the other popular one?
Oh, Reiki?
Reiki. Yeah, like it's that sort of stuff is the type of magic we're talking about.
What we're talking about is any effort to freely and consciously become more integrated at all levels, vertically and horizontally, consciously, subconsciously, and superconsciously. So that could include moving energy through the body and circulating it. That could also include visualizing archetypal symbols and images in a balanced way throughout the body, so that you practice the art of embodying in a balanced way our heritage as beings who have evolved. We as evolved beings have inherited all of human history and all of our spiritual history. So imagining symbols and archetypes in the body is a way of creating a bridge or a connection between our physical existence and those unconscious levels of existence that are a part of us right now but that we're not aware of. So all of our actions right now are being dictated by unconscious impulses, and this is a system for reclaiming those deeper levels of mind so that we can actually be present and have actual free will.
Okay. So then it would not include something like using, like, burning sage or using crystals laid out in a certain way and saying prayers. It wouldn't include things like that?
It can include things like that as well, and the reason is that since symbols are associated with one another in a meaningful way, in a way that has an impact on the psyche, it's also the case that certain chemical compounds, certain minerals, certain crystals, certain plants have associations as well.
Okay.
So for the same reason that you might imagine different symbols in the body, even though we're not getting power in this kind of magic or in any kind of magic, because there's no such thing. We don't get power from anything other than God. There's no such thing as getting any power from anything but God. God's power is filtered through God's emanations. So there's no such thing as, for example, in good magic, you get your power from God, but in bad magic, you get your power from the devil. There's two different sources of power that you can draw from. That's not a thing. There's only one source of power. There's no such thing as a secondary source of power.
Okay.
But evil or black magic would involve selfishly, for your short-term gain, entangling God's emanations in a way that isn't aligned with natural law. And good magic involves organizing the energies of your body and mind in a way that honors natural law and makes you more symmetrical and more present and more godlike, more vertical and more horizontal in that Christian way, in that Jesusonian way, I could say.
Uh-huh.
So
Jesusonian.
yeah.
Okay.
So for the same reason, so for example, over the map of the Sephirot, you could put gods from the Egyptian system, or gods from the pagan system, or gods from the Hindu system. But the reason for that would not be to derive any power from any of those gods, but to use those gods as symbols on that map to balance them. So whatever systems of symbols most resonate to you, you might be more likely to gravitate towards. The tarot system is the same way. The tarot cards, the tarot system was a comprehensive or well-rounded system of symbols that, if understood, and in the same way that Jesus initiates that horizontal alchemy by relating with all people, you can initiate that horizontal alchemy by relating to all the archetypes of the tarot. Mm-hmm. And that's what this system is actually for.
Okay.
And so you wouldn't, in this system, use tarot cards to divinate and predict the future, but you would use the tarot cards as archetypal symbols in a Jungian sense to integrate your personality more wholeheartedly. Now, archetypal images and composite symbols would also include certain herbs or certain crystals, because mineral compounds are also of types thematically.
Uh-huh.
So if you were trying to balance your mercy and your justice instincts, you might use herbs or crystals that are associated symbolically with those things and use them in a balanced way. But it's for that purpose of integrating the psyche, not getting anything from those compounds.
Okay, so what you're saying, like to draw, just because I've always interested in people's opinion, like people's take on what is good and what is bad magic, and where is that line. So I kind of want to get to the. So you're saying that if your intention is to integrate your own psyche, to remember what you should know, or to like remember who you are, and to connect with the power that you have always had, that is good magic. But if you are rather trying to get something that you don't believe to be yours by right, then it's bad magic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's dead on with something that Butler says in this book, which is that one of the definitions of evil is unbalanced force. So even if you felt like you're just reclaiming something that does belong to you, if everything that you ask for is right-handed, if you're only asking for power and you're only asking for glory and you're only asking for justice, then you're still participating in, you're still engaging in a magic of unbalanced force. Those things are inherently yours, but it's not good to just work out the right side of your body. It's not good to just work out the right side of your psyche. That's a magic of unbalanced force. And so that still is evil in a sense. Not as evil as trying to take things that are not yours at all. But those would be, and Butler describes a couple different definitions of evil in this. So it sounds like those would really interest you.
Okay.
I don't understand the first one. I've read it a few times, and it's about the fact that there is a void of black chaos that desires to pull things into it, and it's like the essence of malevolence itself. But I can't conceptualize what that is or why it would exist or what exactly he's referring to. I just can't wrap my head around it. I don't know. Then there's the definition of unbalanced force, and then another definition is to live in the ways of the past or to live in the ways of the future. So anything unmindful is evil in one of his definitions. So, for example, if you go around living like an animal because that's the way of the past, and so you're like, well, I want to reclaim my animal side, so I'm going to go live like an animal. No, you're living in a way that was ripe in the past and is not ripe now.
Uh-huh.
But if you're a pacifist who doesn't want to stick up for what's right because a world could potentially exist in the future of our evolutionary journey in which pacifism would be the best way to maintain peace, then you're actually cowardly avoiding what's ripe in the present moment, which is sometimes to stand up for what's right, even in ways that you don't enjoy, which could even include fighting Nazis or something like that.
Sure.
So that's one of his definitions: living in the past or living in the future. And magic is really about reconnecting with yourself and reconnecting with the present and reconnecting with what's eternal.
Interesting. And that first one, the idea that like, I wonder if the idea that you don't understand it is kind of part of the point. It kind of reminds me of the idea of like Lovecraftian type horror. So H.P. Lovecraft was a writer. He wrote a lot of different, very like far out there kind of horror stories about a realm of the great old ones, the main one being Cthulhu. And these are like ancient horrors that maybe lived here forever ago, but maybe didn't. And they're like unexplainable and you go insane if you see it. But there's like, the idea is that there's like that there is this realm that is trying to break into our realm and to reclaim our world for these primordial beings that are, you look at them and you just go insane and either run from it or run into it. And that idea just kind of reminded me of that. Like,
I see. Yeah.
This kind of horror that like you can't totally understand.
An incomprehensible kind of void of chaos.
And an evil madness. Like that you couldn't, if you looked into it, you would just go insane.
Right. So then how could you describe it or define it? That's
Right.
a really great point, dude.
Yeah.
And do you want me to read you that section and see if maybe it makes more sense to you?
Sure.
His ears were burned and Brendan just texted me.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, that's cool.
Has he texted you recently?
No, we text like every few weeks max, maybe every couple months.
Cool.
So, yeah, that's cool. So chapter 1 was some definitions and a general survey. Chapter 2, human personality. Chapter 3, the magical thesis. Chapter 4, the apparatus of magic. Chapter 5, the kings of Edom. So his definitions of evil are based on the 19th book of Genesis. A story about Abram. And yeah, now here's this part I just don't understand. Before considering the esoteric and magical application of the story, let us consider the problem of evil in itself. What is evil? The magical doctrine is that there are several kinds of evil, some of which, to use a paradox, are not evil. The first type of evil is the innate resistance of form to force. The first type of evil is the innate resistance of form to force. So one Kabbalistic way of describing this, and just to mention this very, very briefly, Kabbalah is the esoteric branch of Jewish thought, of the Hebraic tradition, and supposedly scholars disagree about where this came from. Our friend Neil, for example, doesn't believe that the Tree of Life system came from the Kabbalah, but that it's really a later development, so it doesn't come from the ancient Kabbalah. But most Kabbalists do seem to believe, as far as I can estimate, that the Tree of Life is an original invention of the Kabbalah. So Abraham himself would have possessed that map. Most Kabbalists seem to say that.
Okay.
Neil would disagree, and he's very, very educated. I'm sure he has very good reasons to disagree with that. But because that Kabbalistic map, now I don't know if it's really from the original tradition or if it's later invention, but the point is that Tree of Life map of the Kabbalah is the general map that's used in all magical systems. And because it's such a good way of organizing the many around the one, organizing diversity around unity. So why the hell did I bring that up? Okay. In the original Kabbalah stories, so let's go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So there was two primordial forces. This is the yin and yang of the Hebrews. Shemayim and Aretz, heaven and earth. Heaven is spaciousness, and Ara is specification. So basically, unity itself was spacious, and then the desire to specify and become something particular, something unique, emerged as a seed out of that, and then a tension or a friction immediately became evident between those two primordial forces, and the friction and the interaction between those two caused them to spin off on each other, which started to generate worlds. So some friction or resistance is inherent to us having form and being unique beings. and that is a kind of evil because it's a kind of friction, it's a kind of warfare.
Yeah.
But it's just a part of life. It's just that kind of friction is just a part of life. It's not a bad, unripe thing. It's just a part of the plan, a part of the way it works. So when he says the inherent resistance of form to force, he's saying, and Dion Fortune has a book about this called The Cosmic Doctrine. She explains this in detail, or Genesis Meditations by Neil Douglas Klotz. But what he's saying is that inherent conflict that exists between earth and heaven, between Ara and Shemaiah, to use Jesus' words. Those two forces.
So that's the whole description of the thing? The first type of evil? That's like that sentence is it?
No, that's just one sentence he's leading up to this, but I'm trying to explain because what does that even mean? The inherent resistance of form to force. What does that mean?
To me, that sounds like reality has oppositional defiance disorder to God. That like it's every like resistance of everything to be what it is when it doesn't want to be what God decides that it should be right now.
That is totally a thing, but you are describing a later type of evil.
Okay.
So that is what's being described here is the fact that in order for unity to become duality and then duality to interact with for the two to interact with one another in a way that then creates more and more, some friction is involved.
Yeah.
That's all that's being said here. There's a big difference between friction being involved in the process of existing, which is totally appropriate, and resisting being what you were created to be, which is what's inherently like satanic or Luciferian. Just like I exist and God has given me everything that I need to exist as me and made me beautiful, good, and true, and here I am. But I want more. I don't want to be what I am. I want something different.
Yeah.
That's a later kind of evil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, funny thought while you said that like the idea that the friction is necessary, like for two to interact and become more, there needs to be friction. That's like also sex. Like there needs to be friction. Two things.
Sex is pretty much just friction.
Yeah.
It's just wet friction.
Right.
Yeah. So wet friction is just inherent to the whole thing. It's like it's pleasurable, but it's also like it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's a process. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the kind of, he's like, it's evil in that sense that it's not perfectly pleasurable because there's a competitive or warlike element to it, but it's not a bad kind of bad.
Yeah.
That's exactly. So the first type of evil is the innate resistance of form to force. Organized form imposes restrictions upon free-moving force, but this very restriction and opposition enables the force to be controlled and directed. In physical life, we observe that the friction between the foot and the ground enables us to move forward. In a frictionless world, walking would be impossible and force ineffective, and this principle of restriction works in other fields. By the restriction of boiler and cylinder and piston, steam is harnessed and made to do useful work. So this evil of inertia is in reality no true evil, but part of the machinery of this evolving universe. There is, however, a form of inertia which goes beyond this normal and beneficial one, and this form may truly be called evil. This is what I don't understand. It is the inertia of formlessness and chaos, the abortion of space, the cosmic quicksand. Here there is no definite resistance, no springboard from which life can climb to greater heights. But just as the shifting sands of the quicksand through providing no takeoff yet will cling to and impede and finally draw down into their depths whatever trusts to them, so is it with the cosmic chaos. Evolving life, finding no resistance, no fulcrum for its lever, may be absorbed and rendered impotent in this chaos and darkness and the gates of the land of night.
Damn. Yeah. I mean, it's like it sounds like he's talking about some sort of other realm that opens up into ours or something like that.
I love your example. Yeah. I mean, I don't know of a better way to describe it than the example you brought up from Lovecraft.
Yeah.
It does remind me of if we say there's no reason for existence, so I'm just going to do whatever brings me immediate pleasure. That is a kind of formless, chaotic way of living that's probably moving in the direction of what he's describing.
Maybe. Yeah. It also made me think of like just of black holes and yin chi and dark matter and the idea that there is like dark matter all around us and that it may bleed into our universe. And I think those concepts are I suspect those concepts are all related with each other.
Okay.
Mainly based on the Magus of Java and the second book, whatever the second book by Costa Danow says. But it sounds kind of dark mattery. It sounds like the idea that there's this other material that seeps into our world, and like black holes might be where that happens. We don't know what's on the other side of a black hole. That could be a portal to Cthulhu world. Who knows?
Yeah. Right. And it sounds like Butler has an emphasis on will and balance. And that how do we know that we're not slipping in that direction? And I would think that just aimless, selfish indulgence would move us in the direction of this cosmic quicksand he's describing.
Yeah.
And that balanced, active, present moment, creative free will would be a safeguard against it. And that's something that we have to choose in every moment, not something that we can we go through some magical initiation and now we have that protection. It's like, no, it's literally just up to you moment to moment right now.
You have to stay alert. You have to stay conscious. You have to stay thoughtful about how you're doing it.
Yeah.
All the time. You can't go back to sleep.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Butler, one cool fun fact about Butler, well, a couple. One of them is that he's the only Western esotericist I've read who has explicitly stated that Aleister Crowley was a black magician. And I so appreciate him for that, because I feel like Aleister Crowley did do awful things. Somebody died at one of his rituals. So was that a sacrifice? Who knows? How and why did they die?
I think many. I mean, I've heard so many different stories about people dying in Crowley-related things, but
I didn't know that.
I can't cite anything, but I've
I
heard
didn't
so
know
many weird stories about crazy orgy magic and crazy shit that he was doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the Western esoteric community lets him slide because one of the things that he did that was perhaps chaotic neutral as opposed to chaotic evil, to use the D&D terms, was he published a lot of the private materials. He broke his oaths and published a lot of private esoteric materials. And then other magicians borrowed from... They were able to not technically break their oaths because the information was already public. So they would say, oh, my source is Aleister Crowley. And they would publish things that were good, but they're still using him as a source. And one of the main respected voices in the Western esoteric tradition is Israel Regardie. And I just read his book, The Middle Pillar, and it was nothing compared to Butler's writing, because it's kind of just it's like you want to really be safe and get a lot of psychotherapy and become more self-aware before you engage in magical training. But it's not really describing how to go about psycho-spiritual development in a way that's righteous and ripe and good and true. It's just not Butler. It's just not Yoda.
Yeah.
Well, Israel Regardie, very respected because he published a massive textbook that's 1,200 pages called The Golden Dawn. And The Golden Dawn is a magical... fraternity that integrated a lot of systems from the past into one. So it's this kind of amalgam of magic from a lot of sources in one tradition. Butler's feeling, and this is, I don't know if he published this, but this is what a friend of his told me, was that Butler felt like the Golden Dawn tradition tried to integrate too much. It tried to just cram too much under one roof. Regardie published that. That's why Regardie is one of the most regarded. Boom, psh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to do it.
I avoided it on purpose. And then I was like, no, I'll make the pun.
Yeah.
Don't dodge the pun, make it. And why he's one of the most widely regarded voices of the Western esoteric tradition is because of what he published. And, but he was Crowley's secretary for a long time. And he doesn't call out the fact that Crowley was a black magician, and Butler does. And Butler explains in grounded Christian and Jungian terms how to go about using symbols to integrate your psyche. And I think everything about that is good. And he's the only one that I've read who says, yeah, what Crowley was doing was black. And so I think that's great. Another fun fact about Butler is that he was personal friends with... Evan, would you mind looking up the creator of Sherlock Holmes?
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Arthur Conan Doyle. He was personal friends with Arthur Conan Doyle and would help him brainstorm Sherlock Holmes episodes.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And one of the things that Butler teaches, not in this book, but in its sequel, which is called The Magician, His Training and Work, is that you do your rituals in your morning or evening, and you do your prayer ritual, and you chant your Hebrew, and you visualize your images, and great. During the day, you want to leave all of that where it was and just be attentive. And he says specifically, which I think is cool that he was friends with Conan Doyle, he says, be observant. in your life. Be observant. And that would extend to being internally and externally observant. Be observant of your thoughts and feelings. And the friend of mine who was apprenticed under him while he was alive, because Butler has passed now, but my friend who was apprenticed under him advises that anyone who chooses to engage in this psychospiritual system would go through mindfulness training first. Because if your goal is to be as present and balanced as possible, and that's your first and primary and permanent practice, that's the golden thread in the center of the whole thing, then everything else can organize itself around that really well. Yeah. And you can avoid getting so obsessed with these concepts that you actually are just tangling up your intellect instead of freeing your creative unconscious. And so that seems to be a really important element of this. The example of Jesus and present moment awareness.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I'm going to regurgitate something Jordan Peterson said, which is about George Orwell, who wrote 1984. After he wrote 1984, which was sort of his like nightmare, horrible future, like a dystopian future, he also wrote a later book that was based on the idea of like, well, what would a utopian society actually look like? Like, how could that work? And it was a story called Island, which I have not read, but
I thought Island was by Aldous Huxley.
It's Huxley, and I'm thinking of Brave New World.
Thank you.
So
yes,
Huxley
yes.
wrote Brave New World. That's his dystopia. Then later he wrote Island.
Yeah.
So in Island, which I have not read, a guy ends up on an island where there's a utopian society, and the organizing thing that everything is around is pay attention. And there's birds on the island that constantly tell everybody, pay attention, and they're just constantly reminded of that. And that's the sort of keystone thing of how they create a society where everything's going well, is that everybody's always
We just talked about that in the last episode, was that I always forget this fool's name, Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, America shall introduce a pure religion. And that's what we talked about in the last episode, is that the purpose of creating the United States, because this was a Masonic plot, was to create an example of how checks and balances could keep territories at peace with one another in a kind of overseeing. There's an overseeing federal government, but the states should have more power. Not saying we're sticking to the original plan perfectly here, but the idea behind it with free speech, that would allow the greatest ideas to rise to the top, which would eventually create or birth, as Emerson said, who was a Mason, the pure religion. A retired Mason, which are the best ones that, they study the stuff and then they go, okay, I don't need this. Yeah. You know what? I take that back. Some people remain Masons, but they don't take it too seriously. So I take that back.
Or some may stay in it because they want to try and steer it in a better direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I do like it when I hear of people like Emerson and John Steinbeck, who were Masons for a time and they left it behind. I tend to like them. Yeah. But that's not necessarily the case. So sorry. But that was what Emerson was pointing to, though, was that America, with its free speech and the example that it is, could have all the best ideas rise to the surface, and the pure religion that America is birthing is something like mindfulness. Yeah. But it's mindfulness supported by other psychospiritual systems and tools, but that's got to be the crux of it. And when there is a pyramid with the block on the top missing, part of the U.S. seal, the top block is missing and there's an eye above it, that's what it's saying, is that all of the ideas are culminating in the realization that mindfulness is the cornerstone of the religious life.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Invocation and evocation, two magical concepts that Butler describes. Invocation is asking the forces more powerful than you to gracefully work through you or bestow something on you, and evocation is practicing your dominion over what's beneath you. So evocation would be moving your physical body because it's under your dominion. Okay. And invocation would be asking Jesus to help you stay present throughout the day. Okay. And so those are just two concepts. And humans, we occupy some place in the cosmic hierarchy that leads all the way up to God's perfect heaven and reaches all the way down into the material. Mm-hmm. And we are somewhere in that hierarchy. And what we want is to be properly placed in it so that we practice rightful dominion over what we ought to practice rightful dominion over, and we take care of nature, and we take care of our families, and we take care of our bodies. And also we constantly have grace and order and beauty raining down on us from what's above us on the hierarchy, so that it's always moving down. And the flow of energy in the Western esoteric systems, the good ones at least, it's always down. So to give an example of a ritual in this tradition, there would be a glowing light above the head, and then glowing lights throughout the body representing different points.
And this you're talking visualization, like
Yes.
you would visualize this.
Yes.
Okay.
So a human body is surrounded by an electromagnetic biofield.
Okay.
And it's kind of shaped like, well, you've seen the pictures of the saints where there's like a, almost like vaginal shaped oval. So it has a point at the top and a point at the bottom, but it's like an oval around the body.
Also what everybody in Dragon Ball Z looks like when their aura is visible.
Perfect.
Same exact shape. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that kind of egg, that kind of auric egg of energy around the human body, it is something that we want to take under our conscious dominion as well. So if the body is under your conscious dominion and you're mindful in your body, then when you move, it's graceful, and you take care of your body, and you eat things that your body actually wants you to eat because you're actually consciously connected to it, and everything just works better.
Yeah.
The same thing for that aura. You want the aura to be under your conscious dominion so that you understand moment to moment how you're feeling and the energy that you're carrying and the energy that you're bringing into rooms that you walk into and everything.
Yeah.
So these visualization practices are about reclaiming your dominion over your energy so that you can have, in Butler's system, I would say, so that you can have a Christ-like influence.
Yeah.
And so these are points in that field. That's what you're visualizing. And Butler, I think, implies that they are actual organs of the aura. They are actually organs of the aura. They're not just imagined symbols. The aura actually has some kind of physiology to it that is a self-contained system.
That there are different points in the aura that have specific jobs and that do things to energy and then pass on to other parts.
Yeah.
Like organs.
Yeah. And they're not like, separate, distinct objects so much as they are swirling regions. And so this practice of imagining a light here, then they have visualizations for moving it through different areas of the aura. Mm-hmm. And those areas of the aura are associated with those composite symbols, those associated symbols groups that we talked about. Mm-hmm. And imagining the energy moving through the aura and the physical body in certain orders and sequences helps to bring the light of God and goodness into our psyche and into our body. Mm-hmm. But it's always so in some yoga systems, you would start with your root, and then you would try to bring the energy up to the forehead or to the top of the head. The Western systems, like Butler's, never go in that order. They always go from, we're bringing God into our body and we're giving the energy back up to God. The human system in our fallen state is like an open circuit. It's like we're plugged in, but the circuit's not closed, so we're not powered properly or consistently. And these practices for bringing the light down from God and handing it back to God is the practice of closing the energetic circuit of our physical and subtler bodies so that we're integrated with that heavenly light.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So that the energy is supposed to pass through us, and if we don't let it pass through us, then things don't work right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly the same as Mesmer's energy for the organs.
Yeah.
Same thing as this more astral energy for the regions of the aura.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the idea.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of like an inner, and I've heard of people talking in different traditions of like an inner and outer energetic field, that there's like sort of two, like that the chakra system expresses one of them, but not the other.
Oh, interesting.
That there's like, one that's more surface level on your body. I'm not sure if this like correlates at all with what you're saying.
I don't either. I don't know much about it or anything about it.
Do the organs associated with the aura, do those correlate with the organs of the body?
Yeah, loosely.
Yeah.
So those and I don't know what those associations are, but in the same sense that there's those association groups that would include colors, Hebrew words, geometric shapes, herbs, and molecular structures, and it even goes down to mathematical stuff. There's also in those associated symbol groups organs. Yes.
So liver might have purple energy.
Yes, and one of the things, yes, that liver could be purple.
Yeah. Is that right? Is that the right one, you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I was thinking about something else.
Okay.
And I was giving 50% of my energy to replying to what you were saying so that I didn't sound like a dick because my brain was already actually thinking about something else.
That's okay.
And which was that Butler's friend Robert King, the liberal Catholic priest that introduced him to this psychospiritual system we're discussing, was trained in identifying intuitively the emotional associations with the problems in organs. So he would help people with their medical problems by intuiting what emotional problems are connected with those. That's an example of using the Kabbalah for healing.
Okay.
Using this form of magic for healing is that your liver could be associated with a particular emotion, a particular purple emotion perhaps, and that dealing with that emotional problem and releasing that unblocked energy could spontaneously result in physical healing. And science is really catching up with that, the emotional impact on physical health.
Sure. You came back to the liberal Catholic thing, and I did want to clarify something about that earlier. So the liberal Catholic Church, what they do differently is they still do the ritual magic. They just feel like we should acknowledge that is what it is. They call it that and acknowledge it as that rather than pretending it's not that.
I know very little about the liberal Catholic Church. That is one element of it.
Okay.
And I only know that all I know actually is that at least one person who played a small role in the founding of the liberal Catholic Church had quit the Catholic Church because he wasn't allowed to be associated with magic. And then I'm assuming that more people involved did it for that same reason.
Yeah.
If you read the liberal Catholic Church's website, they're not like, we broke from the Roman Catholic Church for this and that reason. They just advertise themselves and say, we love Jesus. We want to be an inclusive community where people of a variety of worldviews can come together to participate in worship because group worship is amazing. And we invite everybody to participate, which is the same shit you read on every church website, really.
Sure.
So they don't take some hard stance against the Roman Catholic Church or explicitly advertise association with the esoteric tradition. That's the only little tidbit I happen to know about it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool example. I don't know if we talked about this in another episode recently, but just a cool example of, we were just talking about it at the house at lunch one day.
Okay.
When I came over for lunch. So the way that a metal object is charged, I learned this from a book about electrical theory, is that there are, and I'm going to butcher the scientific details of this as I usually do, but the molecules, I believe, in the metal are arranged in this chaotic, randomized way, and then when they're magnetized with this electromagnetic energy, they all snap into a uniform position and point in that certain direction. And then when they're applied to another metal, because of the uniformity of the direction of the molecules in the metal and the way that the electromagnetic energy is thereby moving through them, it pulls them to that other metal. Something like that. But that fact that, and this part I'm not butchering unless it's not molecules, it's atoms or something like that, because I always get that shit mixed up. But these little thingies in the metal that snap into organization and point themselves in a common direction, and that results in the item being magnetized. That's what's being accomplished in magic, is that you're magnetizing your physical and mental and emotional and unconscious and superconscious full self so that all of you is aimed at God, snapped into place, and order is restored to your full being so that all of you is aimed at God. That's what it's doing.
That makes some kind of sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Magnets are real weird. Remember when ICP said fucking magnets? How
did
do
they
work?
work?
That's good shit.
It
really
is
good.
Yeah, we hated on it too much.
It's very weird.
It's really strange.
That's one of those things where you make fun of it for so long that eventually you say it again and he's like, wait, how do they? That is weird.
Yeah, because I remember the time when we were hating on it, we were like, science can easily explain that. And now we're like, well, but we don't understand the science, and even science can articulate it better.
It's like the whats are doing what? So it does what?
Yeah. Well, it's just electromagnetic and energy flowing in a certain way creates a cause of kind of attraction. It's like
it's just ionization and electrons and protons. It's elementary.
of names for these things.
I gave it names.
I simply name these phenomena.
I came up with words into theory.
I think that's about it. Somebody's interested in learning more about this. Butler has like these introductory books. So this one's called Magic. The next one's called The Magician. And then there's one called Magic and the Kabbalah. And then Lords of Light was one that I just ordered because all these are available as PDFs online. Almost all esoteric stuff is. So that's why I've been reading so many of these because you can just find them for free on your phone. And then one that you can't find is online is Lords of Light, which is his description of the hierarchies of heaven and the angels and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And that's really cool. And so I ordered that one. And then if you read all of his books and then you decide that you want to use the psychospiritual tools that he teaches, he has a book called Apprentice to Magic, which explicitly teaches them.
Wow.
And it's written all in the format of teacher to apprentice. So it's like, I received your letter asking to be trained. Here are some of my initial like tips and cautions and stuff. And you mentioned that you've read all of my other works. And so if you personally wrote Butler a letter and said, hey, I want to study under you, I want to learn your stuff, and then he wrote you back all the letters that you needed to read in sequence in order to enter into this kind of psychospiritual training. That's what that book is. Wow. And it's like $100. It's hard to find. I think you can find one for like 50, but you have to buy it on eBay and stuff like that. Yeah. But the friend of mine that studied under him doesn't doubt the possibility that, like Yoda, he is still available astrally to help people with stuff like this and help people connect with Jesus and connect with their wholeness and organize themselves and restore our image, restore the atom, restore the atom Kadmon. That's the human structure that God intended for us that we've fallen from. Uh-huh. And so, anybody can, and then, I would just pass along my friend's advice that starting with mindfulness training is a really good idea. And Butler advises maybe starting with some method of like character development. Like, I don't think he mentions the 12 steps, but things like that, like structured methods of character development before starting. One that he mentions,
to know thyself really well before you get into this. And
and it is a journey to know yourself. So it's not like you have to know yourself before starting. He doesn't really frame it that way, but the way he frames it is like, there are many, many stupid reasons to engage in a psychospiritual system, and a lot of them have to do with self-delusion and defense mechanisms and compensating for insecurities. And like, is this like buying a big truck? Like, sure, I want to be a big, powerful truck. It's like, okay, that's not a good reason to engage in a psychospiritual system, to engage in high magic. That's probably going to have undesirous effects. And people who participate in this system also have to cease practices from other systems because it can cause a lot of psychic instability. If two different systems with two different goals are practiced simultaneously, it's like pouring two different fuels in a vehicle at the same time. You're just moving something in two different directions at the same time. You don't want to do that. Uh-huh. So he, another system that he advocates using before his system is the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius, which most Catholic spiritual directors go through. And that's it. That's all I got.
Cool. I thought that